All right. I think we're good. We had a couple of technical difficulties real quick, but I think we are live now, both on Facebook and Instagram. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Everybody hear me okay? Any thumbs ups? I need to know. Sweet. All right, I got one from Curb66. So thank you. All right. So let me say this kind of as we get started with this. This is all new for us. We're kind of in uncharted territory as we do this. And so kind of bear with us as we are trying to figure this out on the fly a little bit, the same way that so many of our churches are trying to figure out what to do with this live stream stuff. So we as youth ministers should know all about this, and the other guys who are working with me on this definitely do, but I do not. But we thank you for joining us tonight. Let's start with this. If you don't mind, just in the comments or somewhere, post real quick. We want to know where you're watching from. So, like maybe the city, maybe the town. And then tell us how many people are with you. We want to try to make this somewhat interactive if we can, but we just kind of want to get an idea of how many people are joining us right now as well. So if you're joining us now and you're just coming in, we've just asked people to just kind of let us know where they're from and how many people are with them tonight watching this live stream. Let me start by saying welcome. Thank you for joining us on this. We anticipate tonight that we have listeners from all across the U.S., all across maybe even the globe. And it seems weird that I'm standing in a youth room right now on a Wednesday night when a lot of our kids are in town, and we have no one here. So I'm teaching to a screen with no one in the classroom tonight. And it's odd because there's people doing this all over the world today, right now in this moment. And if you're like me, you're probably beginning to wonder, how long is this chaos going to continue? How long are we going to continue living like this, where all of our social interaction is done this way through a screen? So needless to say, things are crazy right now in our world. And wherever you are tonight, we want you to know this before we get started with this series. We want you to know that we're praying for you, because we understand that this is a time of uncertainty. This is a time of pain. There's some loss in this, and a time of disappointment. And we understand that there are a lot of people who are struggling right now with social distancing and coronavirus, but not just that, but all kinds of hurts. And I'm standing in Middle Tennessee right now, where some of the tornadoes came through, and there's still a lot of people who are recovering, and it's going to take a long time. And so, if you're someone recovering from storms that recently hit Middle Tennessee, or you're someone who has been directly impacted by the coronavirus, or if you're like most of us and the coronavirus has just ruined a lot of your plans, we're praying, because we realize that problems, as big or as small as they may be, are problems, and they're issues and things that we struggle with, and they're things that at times really hurt us and at times really disappoint us. And so we want you to know that we are praying. These last few days have been incredibly chaotic. And so we thought it would be appropriate for us to introduce a series to you tonight, brought to you by some guys that we call ourselves the Youth Ministry Group. And this is our Youth Ministry pizza logo here. If you're wondering what that is, it's a pizza tree on my shirt. And we thought it would be appropriate for us to bring you this new series that we're entitling In the Midst of Chaos. Because isn't that what our world is right now? We're living in a time of chaos, in a time of fear, in a time where our world is filled with disappointment, in a time where our world is filled with uncertainty. But the reality is this: chaos isn't something that's new. There have been plenty of times in the history of our world where people have dealt with things that are really chaotic. And people have been through and experienced even times that may even be more chaotic than what you and I are going through. Chaos is definitely not something new for God's people either. In fact, the Bible tells us that we will face these times of chaos. And even the Bible gives us looks into some pretty chaotic times in the history of our world. And so in this series, our goal, and one of the things that we wanted to do, is we wanted to take a look at some of those times of chaos in the Bible and hopefully help us grow through this time of chaos, grow through the chaos, because even in the midst of chaos, there is still beauty to be found. There is still peace to be found, as we'll talk about tonight. There's still faith to be found in the midst of chaos. There is joy to be found. And you can still find purpose, and you can still find direction. You know, the last several days of my life have been chaotic for another reason. Not just because of the storms that hit Middle Tennessee, and not just because of coronavirus and being quarantined in my house, but because on March 2nd, just a couple of weeks ago, our third little girl was born. That's right. This bearded dude standing here, bearded lumberjack, is the dad of three girls. 3 girls. And life is absolutely chaotic. We have a 4-year-old named Mamie Grace that loves to climb, and she loves to jump off of everything. Her favorite thing to do right now, we have a new couch in our house, and she loves to climb up on the couch and just to jump off and land on whatever happens to be underneath her. And she just absolutely demolishes whatever it may be. We have a 7.5-month-old named Addie, who has earned the nickname Godzilla Baby. And not just because she's a big baby, and not just because she's outgrowing already like 12-month clothes as a 7-month-old, but because she loves to destroy things. She's our really destructive child. She goes around in this walker that she has, and she loves to just bump into and run into as many things as she can and knock things off the walls and knock things of her sisters off, and it makes Mamie Grace really angry. But we call her Godzilla Baby because she loves to destroy things. And now, to top all of the chaos off, we have a 2.5-week-old who is extremely tiny. And every time that we touch her, we feel like we're going to break her. And then throw in the mix now your 4-year-old who might land on her when she jumps off the couch, or Godzilla Baby will think maybe that she's a small building and begin to try to destroy her. Needless to say, our life is crazy. It's chaotic. And there's not a lot of sleep going on in our house right now. However, as a dad of 3 girls, you learn the art of sleeping in the midst of chaos, in the midst of all the screaming babies, and in the midst of all the chaos that's going on in the house around you. As a dad of 3 girls, you kind of learn that art. But if you're a mom, then you probably know how Jesus' disciples felt as they embarked on a journey across the Sea of Galilee. I know that seems like a weird segue, but go to Mark chapter 4 and you'll understand where we're going with this. If you've got a Bible, or if you've got your phone or whatever and can access the Bible, go to Mark chapter 4 and we'll start reading in verse 35. Jesus is really tired, and he's in this place of it seems as though life just isn't slowing down, and there's one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And the life of Jesus in this moment seems pretty chaotic. And so he tells his disciples in verse 35 that they're going to go across the sea in a boat to get away, really, to try to get away from some of the crowd and to try to have this time to relax. And so let's pick up in verse 35. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind them. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and the boat actually began to fill up with water. Now that's sort of significant, at least this storm is, because this storm is different than any other storm. Let me remind you about some of the men who were on this boat. These were men who had experienced storms. They were fishermen, guys who'd grown up on these waters and had seen storms that had rolled in and rolled out all on this body of water that they were on that day. But there was clearly something different, because this time the storm brings these men to their knees, and they're absolutely terrified. They're shaking in their sandals. And then listen to where we find Jesus in verse 38. It says, Jesus was asleep at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. Jesus was snoozing, right? And he was sleeping good. He had a nice little cushion and things were good. With all the chaos that was happening around them, as the waves were crashing into the boat, the winds were howling, the men were screaming, the boat's beginning to fill up with water, and all the men are terrified for their lives. Jesus is asleep. And so when Katie asks me how I can sleep in the midst of chaos and how I can sleep through all the screaming babies, guys, you can use this one. I just remind her that I'm trying to be like Jesus and practice the art of resting in the midst of chaos. So the disciples run to the back of the boat where Jesus is asleep. And I can imagine that they began to call out to him as they're running. They're yelling for him, Jesus, wake up, wake up. Where are you, Jesus? Get up, come help us, Jesus, Jesus. And they're screaming anything that they can think of. Rabbi, Master, come save us, come help us, wake up, wake up. And I don't know if Jesus was asleep or if he was fake sleeping, as I do sometimes when my 4-year-old is wanting attention. But they say what maybe seems to be the magic words that wake Jesus up. The disciples woke him up shouting, Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? Teacher, don't you care that we're about to die? Jesus, don't you care? And Jesus says, of course I care. And he wakes up. Verse 39, when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, Peace, be still. Peace, be still. And suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Jesus spoke 3 words. 3 simple words. And it's incredible to me that in the midst of the chaos, Jesus says these 3 words, and that's it. And I don't even really imagine Jesus yelling these words or screaming these words. I almost picture Jesus saying these things, these 3 words, almost really nonchalant. Like, he wakes up and he realizes what's going on and he hears what the disciples are telling him. And then he just says, all right, that's enough. Just peace, be still, stop it. It's time to stop. And immediately the storm that knocked these men to their knees, that filled their eyes with tears, and that filled their hearts with fear of death, just stops. And everything is calm. Everything is at peace. At least it appears. Almost everything. Look at verse 40. Then he asked them, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? You see, Jesus knew something. Jesus knew that while the chaos around the men seemed pretty terrible and terrifying to them, that the greatest chaos that existed was not outside of the boat, it was the hearts who were inside the boat. And so Jesus calms the storm, and immediately after that, he begins to settle the hearts of the men. Guys, we're living in a world that's full of chaos. We're living in a time that is uncertain. We're living in a time that has a lot of disappointment. And we're living in a time of absolute chaos. And you might even be feeling the way that the disciples were feeling as they ran to Jesus and they called out to him, "Wake up, don't you care?" Maybe you found yourself saying those words before as you look at your life and you see all the chaos that exists around you. And you look at all the chaos and the storms of life, and you see all these things, and you just keep going to Jesus saying, "Wake up, don't you care about the things that are going on in my life?" And here's what I believe Satan wants you to believe. See, I think Satan wants you to believe that in the midst of chaos in your life, Jesus is just asleep, and he doesn't care. But I think Jesus wants us to realize something else. Jesus wants you to realize what he wanted his disciples to realize that night on the boat. And it's this: his presence is greater than my problem. His presence is greater than all my problems. Jesus is reminding the men of this very thing. I am in the boat. Of all the things that are going on around us, I know that the storm is crazy, and he calms the storm before he talks to the men, and he says, "Peace be still," to the storm, and it ceases. But I think he was trying to remind the men of something that night and to teach them something. And it's I am greater. Jesus is greater than the chaos that exists around the boat. Jesus is greater than the chaos that exists around the boat. There are a lot of things that are going on in our world right now that have us on edge and have us wondering what's going to happen. Some people even feel like it's the apocalypse and they're going and buying all the toilet paper and stuff. If you're that person, I've got a bone to pick with you. But now notice the response of the disciples, because they realize something in the midst of all of this and the things that are happening. It says in verse 41, the disciples were absolutely terrified. They were afraid. And they say these words, "Who is this? Who's this man that even the winds and the waves obey him?" They were afraid, but maybe they were afraid for a good reason. I think they realized that as strong as the storm was around them, the greater power was standing in the boat with them and staring them in the eyes. And so here's the message tonight, and what I want you to understand and I want you to take with us. How can I have peace in the midst of all this chaos that is going on outside of the boat? Here it is. Jesus is in your boat. Jesus is in your boat. And you have to understand that it's not about all the things that are going on around us. It's not about coronavirus. It's not about the storms that struck Middle Tennessee. It's not about the chaos that exists because your prom may be canceled at school. It's not about the chaos that may exist because a relationship ended that had been a part of your life for years and years and years. It's not about the chaos that exists in all of these other things. What is important to remember is it's not about the chaos outside of the boat, but it's about who is in the boat, who is living inside of us. You know, I think we give the disciples here a pretty bad rep, but didn't they do something right? I think something right that they did here was they knew who was in the boat with them. when chaos ensued and they didn't know where to turn and they didn't know what to do, maybe the first place they should have gone was Jesus. And maybe they should have had enough faith to just realize that Jesus was going to save them and it was all going to be okay. But shouldn't they get some credit that they at least realized that Jesus was there and they went to Jesus and they woke him up? Guys, Jesus is in the boat with us. And so I want to tell you tonight that it's okay to be afraid of what may come. It's okay to be uncertain. But remember this. Remember Jesus is there. Remember that he is in the boat. As we close tonight, I want us to all say these words together. It may seem a little odd because you may be sitting in front of a screen by yourself and there's people in the next room and they're going to hear you talking to a screen and it's going to be really weird. But I think it's important that we say these words, that we actually speak these words, because these words are very, very powerful when we actually can vocalize them. And so here's what I want you to say. Wherever you're watching tonight, in this moment, I want us to say these words together. His presence is greater than my problems. Ready? We're going to do it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. His presence is greater than my problems. One more time. His presence is greater than my problems. And guys, when we know that he is in control of the storm and in control of the chaos, you can be under control. And you don't have to be tossed around by the chaos. Right now, you're living in a time of fear, uncertainty, disappointment, loss, pain, a world of chaos. But with Jesus in our boat, we can have peace in the midst of chaos. Guys, we want to thank you again for joining us tonight. And now we want you to do something that's kind of unique and kind of cool. As we were talking about this series and what we were going to do with it and how we were going to make it interactive, we thought about having this big, like, world's greatest or biggest small group or whatever, where we all get together and we're all able to chat and to talk. But then we started to think about how many youth groups just need to be together. And how many youth groups need to be able to just spend some time together tonight with one another. And so we've encouraged youth ministers to set up some way that you can chat together tonight, some way that you can be a part of some discussion. And so we've sent out a list of discussion questions. You can find them posted actually on our Facebook page. And I believe it's posted on our Instagram account as well. If it's not, Blaine McKinney or Will Harrison or someone will post it here in just a second, I am sure. But what we want to encourage you to do is just spend a few minutes tonight with your youth group, discussing and just being there for one another, and reminding each other that it's all going to be okay and that there is peace to be found in the midst of chaos. Thank you guys for joining us. We look forward to being with you again next week.